Okay, so what have we got? Camera number 2 here, no meter, shutter needs service, probable damage to transfer shaft, prism looks okay, screen needs cleaning. NB, do not crank film advance lever, front rings were incorrectly placed, meter, top gear loose, one screw missing on prism. So a bit of a mystery, it may not be completely destroyed. So we've got to be careful going in. Okay, so front rings were incorrectly placed. That's been noted. Just checking the position of the dial there on the meter. That's correctly placed in terms of where those rings are now. There's certainly a problem here because this is not in the right position. So the rings are quite possibly out of place. Let's have them off. Those slots in the screws are a bit clogged up with lacquer, and I think a bit hard to keep the screwdriver engaged. Just get them off. Lift off the front rings. This one in particular is not sitting where I'd expect to find it. Okay. Well, my note said not to crank the film advance, so we don't know whether the transfer shaft is being held down firmly at the top. So be a bit cautious about that. Screw loose, it is. The prism is held down with 3 screws now by the looks of it. Looking at that meter cord there, it looks to me like that's been replaced. It doesn't have the traditional red paint on it. One small screw from the bracket that holds down the prism here is certainly missing. The prism is held down to the housing okay though. Pop that carefully to one side. The mirror looks pretty good to me. I can see something odd immediately in here. There's something sticking out right here. Now there's a buffer pad that runs all the way across the front there, and that's where when the mirror rises, it's its bump stop for all practical purposes. And at this piece here, it appears to be a piece of that buffer pad, but it's running at an odd angle, which suggests that it's out of place and may have fallen into something. It could certainly be jamming things up. We'll just check the state of the mirror. It does go down. I've certainly been here and replaced that there. That screw there is not an original. It's been put there probably by, well, almost certainly by me. Let's take these gears off the front here. Those little pinions, this one's on a shaft, and that shaft runs through to the drum that holds the cord for the meter, and this one here is just the idler from it, which couples with these front rings. Okay, so everything looks pretty safe there. What happens if we try and move the film advance? Ah, there's a big click. Hear that click? Something jumped a tooth. Now this rack is being held down firmly, so there's no likelihood that it jumped at that point, but something jumped. It's that shutter just dropped back over the top of the shaft. I suspect that shaft's damaged. So the way that jumped over something, it looks to me like the teeth on this transfer shaft are damaged, and that transfer shaft is probably not sitting in its correct position. Alright, well, I think that the only thing to do really is to jump in and find out exactly what is wrong with this camera. So I'll start the stripping down process. I know enough to know that there's no danger that I'm going to fix this problem simply by adjusting something. Something is broken. So I'll start at the top of the camera and I'll just strip everything off the top plate. We'll do the same on the bottom of the camera. And work our way in to the camera. The front will need to come off, and we'll be able to find out the state of the transfer shaft, which is a cam. The cam surfaces on there activate the mirror and capping plate. They push them down into lock them down into working position as you cock the shutter. I'm going to take that chrome plate off too while we're here. How would this come to be broken? Well, that's a mystery. We don't really know the camera's entire history. It looks to me like someone has serviced it before, because it looks like the meter cord has been replaced, but beyond that we don't know. One of the other cameras I had here in my heap, which I have since dealt with, that screw is not playing the game. It appeared to me that someone had the front off the camera and replaced the meter cord, but the shutter itself looked like it had never been serviced, which is a real puzzle, because compared to opening the camera up to remove the front or deal with any problem inside there, dealing with the shutter at the same time is only a minor thing. Okay, let's get this leatherette patch off the advance lever. That shows two types of adhesive, so it's certainly been off before. Just clearing these screw heads because they are clogged up with old adhesive. Can't even see the slot in that one. All right. I usually, if I know I'm going to have to get into the front of the camera, I would usually start by completely stripping the top of the camera, because then it will sit down flat on the bench top. And we're going to need to get that stuff off sooner or later anyway. Right, the leatherette on this base plate, what's that like? This is peeling off quite well. The adhesive is fairly brittle and giving way easily. This could be the original adhesive. I don't know that anyone's been in here, which is surprising because that meter cord certainly looked like someone had been in. I think it is possible to get the front back on the camera without dismantling the base, but it would be awkward and it's not something I would do. Anyway, that's a good piece of leatherette. It's in good condition. I've got no problems with that. Okay, so the leatherette, the chrome trim here is held on place with a number of screws. Seven, I think. This camera's in quite good cosmetic condition, which means it's a good candidate for repair, because it's always much easier to fix a broken pretty camera than it is to try and make a working ugly camera pretty again. Chrome trim plate comes off, and we have a little coil spring here. It operates the capping plate, and we have a finer coil spring here which operates the lock, the end of film lock. I'll unhook this spring and lift this lever out. This is the lever that sets the frame counter. We can lift that lock lever out, lift that spring out. Now this lever will only come out if we remove the whole counter assembly. You can't get that lever tucked in under there without that. We'll leave that in place at the moment. We don't need to attack that. I'll have the tripod socket out. The screws are traditionally loose, and I can do a good job of cleaning this if I put it through the ultrasonic cleaner, and then it can go back on and be tightened up nice and clean. That is the little piece from the base of the film cassette chamber. That's where the end of your film cassette sits. Okay, so we've got that strip. At the front of the camera we're going to need the leatherettes off. We've got a patch on the shutter release button, little rectangular patch. These are not uncommonly missing. Fortunately, small rectangular things can be cut out of just about anything available, really. We'll take off the release button. It's a single screw. That screw, it's got quite a broad head on it, but it's quite a shallow screw, short screw. Much the same as screws that hold what? Oh, the same size as the screws that hold the tripods, the accessory shoe in place, except they are chrome. That one there is just nickel plated, and it's ugly with encrusted adhesive and the remains of the leatherette, and probably a bit of corrosion for good measure. Okay, this leatherette looks like it's going to come off without a fight. It's a bit crusty sounding. That's typically a sign that there's corrosion underneath, and the corrosion is making the adhesive let go from the front plate. Let's have a look. Well, there's a little bit of corrosion there, but hardly any at all. That's a very, very good example, and the adhesive has just died from old age, really. And the same on this side. Be cautious getting the leatherettes off. It can be tricky when you're pushing your scalpel underneath and the action is more one of a wedge. You're levering the leatherettes up rather than cutting anything. But if it suddenly goes, your scalpel's likely to slip. You could end up slipping and cutting something. When these cameras were still somewhat current in the workshop, no time at all was wasted getting leatherettes off cameras. Anything that looked vaguely like resistance was instantly just dealt to. The leatherette would just be stripped off the camera violently, and new leatherette put in place upon reassembly. Okay, so we've got our leatherettes off. We've got 4 screws on the front plate. Now under the 4 screws there should be 3 washers in each position. They are saucer shaped washers, and they're springy. They're used to allow you to give some adjustment to the front plate so that you can get the lens mount to film plane distance correct. Because it's an interchangeable lens camera, that feature is important. If it was a camera with a fixed lens, that feature would be entirely unimportant because you'd be making your adjustments to the focus of your fixed lens. Okay, I've got that top chrome plate loose. I might just as well lift that off the body while I'm here. And the front plate, that should come straight off. Transfer shaft sticking in the front there. Let's get that out. So here's our shutter. Now, I said that there was a problem with that mirror buffer, didn't I? Well, there it is. You can see that that's certainly a problem. Now, that was probably jamming the mechanism up. I'll just strip that little piece away. The adhesive's given up on it. It's perfectly fine. It can go back when we're done, but the adhesive's given up, and so it was jamming things up. Right, first we'll investigate the shutter itself and see what state it's in. Well, here I've got the front cam taken from a camera, and I've just used that to cock the shutter. Now, if I release it, it'll run down. Now, this is quite stiff, but it would run down under the impetus of the spring on that front cam. And at this stage, our rack is run against a stop here on this lever. Now, at that stage, the capping plate would lift, hit this lever, which unblocks that rack and allows the rack to continue unwinding. And as the rack continues to unwind, the shutter should release. There it is, and close again. So the shutter's basically functional, nothing broken at all. Certainly will need servicing, I would think, but there's no problem with our shutter. That's good. Let's put that to one side. Let's have a look at the body. I'll gather up my 12 washers before they fall into the depths. Let's just get that mirror down out of the way. That's latched. I'll remove the front cam. I'm looking at this to see if all the teeth are present. Nothing appears to be damaged. That front cam's good. So that's a bonus. Now the rear cam, the main cam, here it is here. Now this was the bit that seemed a bit suspect. Something was jumping over a tooth. At first glance, the teeth on that look good. So there doesn't appear to be any damage there. What about the rack? What about the rack itself? Let's have a look at that. That looks okay. Oh, the gear here is loose. That might have been the source of the problems. Let me inspect that rack. That looks okay. Taking apart the film advance. Now, on the Reflex 3, the little ratchet mechanism which moves things forward is somewhat different to earlier cameras. Now, do you see that tiny spring? Be most careful you don't lose that. Take out that little cam, that little tab there, that's like a drive dog which drives this around. And we'll lift this out of the camera. Now, my meter cord here, that was That didn't appear to be glued in at all. The meter cord's quite stiff. Let's unhook that spring. Take the tension off that. Now on the Reflex 3 there's a screw here which acts to stop the cord from being able to fall off the pulley as easy. Now really that's only an issue for assembly. Once it's under tension in a working camera I don't think that can really fall off anyway. Right, so I'll unhook that cord. The last camera I looked at, the cord appeared quite good, but when I tested it, it just snapped. That one feels fine. I'm going to reuse that. It's very hard to get a good replacement cord, and the original is always nice to use if you've got them. So, what have we got here? The mirror looks a little bit dusty looking. It's okay. It'll mean that the image is, I'll say it looks dusty, it's probably not dust, it's probably deterioration of the silver. But it means that the image that you see in the finder won't be quite as contrasty as it might be with a fine new mirror. But then again, fine new mirrors are very hard to get. So this one it'll be fine. Well, I think I'll continue to strip this down. Take out the film advanced components. I know from experience that the film advanced shaft, the grease on there will have set. It'll be very, very sticky and it can be a source of problems. It's particularly noticeable on the Reflex 3, which means that it's almost certainly something to do with whatever material they were using at the time. Let's just remove these pieces from the top of the camera. Take that spring off so I don't lose it. That's being troublesome. That's better. If I take the spring off now, then the other parts can go through the ultrasonic cleaner. I do not like to put the springs in the ultrasonic cleaner because they're very prone to getting lost. They'll find their way out through the sieve that I'm using to rinse and dry parts off in. And then they're away. Once they're free, they're gone. They're history. Okay, that's all looking pretty promising. I need to get my tool for undoing this rewind button. Now, I don't like to put these cameras down on their front because they're leaning on that mirror. Let's just tuck down this capping plate and the mirror, latch that into place. Now that's down below the level so the camera can sit nicely on the bench. And I've got my special pliers. And that's just enough to get that screw loose. The washer and the button and the spring I'll put to one side. Now when I worked at Kodak they had a a neat little tool for removing those rewind buttons. Basically it was a little recess in the end of a tool, and it had a pin in it which would engage with the hole on those rewind buttons. The rewind buttons have a little hole off to one side. The pin would engage with that, and that would allow you to remove everything quite nicely. My machining skills are not up to making something as tidy as that, so I've got those pliers instead, which is okay because I can use those pliers for other jobs as well. Get this clutch out of here and dismantle the clutch. The clutch is often sticky, yeah, it's a bit dirty and nasty looking. Right, down here. Three screws hold the film advance shaft into the camera body. This one's being a bit hidden by this latch for the rewind button. We'll move that now. So this one's a bit of a mystery. Just release the tension from this thing just by holding back the release lever there. Just need to be able to see these three screws down in here. That should lift out. It does. Reclaim the three screws before they run away. Yeah, this is sticky as they frequently are. Okay, so here we have a brass bush in the base of the take-up spool. Now that's less common with Reflex 3s. Quite commonly they don't have that. So this must be an earlier Reflex 3. Yeah, it is. It's got the setting button on the top of the top cover. I wonder if they changed their practice at that time. Well, the grease here is pretty nasty. All of this black that you can see here, that's the back of the leatherette. That's the fibres from the back of the leatherette. I want all that off there so that when we glue the leatherettes back down, they'll go down nice and flush. That was just the back catch dropping in there as I press down on the camera. So here I'm just scraping this with the back of my scalpel blade. And as you can see, that adhesive is very dry and very brittle because this stuff is just cleaning off like it's not even there. So I'll just get the bulk of that off there, and then I'll probably clean the rest of that down with some acetone or something. But if you're using acetone or anything else to help you get rid of stuff like that, be really, really careful you don't get any on that leatherette on the back of the camera, because it will ruin it. And a nice big piece of leatherette like that, any blemishes on it will really stand out. Okay, well I'll carry on cleaning this stuff up. These parts are all off to the ultrasonic cleaner. Now what they'll get there is 10 minutes in some solvent, which is a wax and grease remover that I just got from the hardware shop. It's made for painters to wipe down surfaces before they paint things. It's very good at removing waxes and greases, just as its name suggests. So I give it 10 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner and that. Here I'm just sorting out stuff that's going to go through the cleaner for me. Some parts I don't put through the cleaner, the springs I don't, anything with paint on I don't, anything like that. Rewind knob I will not. The other pieces certainly can go through. Just making sure I haven't put anything in there by mistake. The rewind shaft, yeah, to do a proper job of cleaning this, you've got to lift this little spring out of its seat, then you can slide this off. I'm going to clean this by hand. Just checking I haven't put anything in here that I shouldn't. Yeah, I have. It's at advanced level I need to clean by hand. And that I'll clean by hand. After they've gone through the ultrasonic cleaner through the degreasing stuff, then I usually do these parts in hot soapy water. I'd use a domestic ammonia based detergent, and they get 10 minutes in that, and then they're rinsed out under hot water, dried with a hairdryer, and they come back looking like new pieces. Well, camera number 2 will live to ride again. It's all go. I found a meter for it, all the little bits and pieces that were missing from the top cover. A good rewind knob, because its original one was a bit sad looking, and it's all good to go. So that's another one out of the way.